Welcome to our first ever Arise, a Widows Forum, and thank you for attending. On a beautiful evening like we're having here in Minnesota, we're honored that you've taken time to join us. I'm Leanne Lorian, and I'm one of the many volunteers who makes Wings for Widows the wonderful organization that it really is. We have an enriching evening prepared for you, featuring Michele, Neff, Hernadez of Soaring Spirits International. We're honored to have Michele launch our fall lineup because she is the expert. She has been working to enhance the lives of widows and widowers in the US and worldwide for the past over 10 years. And Michele has recently written a new book. It's called Different After You, and I hope she'll share a little bit more about it this evening. This forum is being recorded. We will keep you on mute during the presentation. Please use your chat button to ask questions and make your comments. And then at the end, we'll open it up for discussion as time allows. Thank you very much. Now, before I introduce Michele, let me welcome Chris Bentley. Chris is the Executive Director of Wings for Widows, and he wanted a chance to be a part of this launch of our new series. Chris is the amazing visionary who developed Wings for Widows over the past 4 years. Chris is the heart, soul, and passion of Wings for Widows. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Leanne. That was very sweet. And welcome, everyone. We are so excited that so many of you around the country have joined us tonight. Leanne has put together a wonderful program for this fall, and beginning in just a minute with Michele. And Michele, again, thank you for joining us tonight. It is so nice to have you with us. If you've been negatively impacted by the pandemic, perhaps lost a spouse during COVID or due to COVID, we are so sorry. Our hearts go out to you and those still struggling with the disease. I'm not going to assume that just because you've tuned in tonight that you know anything about Wings for Widows. So who are we and what do we do? The short answer is tucked in beneath our logo. We guide new widows and widowers to financial wellness. What does that actually mean? You might think of Wings for Widows as the emergency room for new widows where we treat financial trauma. The difference is that we don't charge for our emergency room services. If you experience medical trauma, you likely visit the ER. You don't try to fix a broken arm at home. You go see a doctor. Someone with experience, someone you can trust to take care of you. Likewise, when you lose a spouse, doesn't it make sense to get professional help? Of course, but it's not always available. Most of the clients we work with don't have a financial advisor or an estate planning attorney or a network of professionals. Where are you supposed to go? Who should you trust for help? And what about muscling through on your own? If you've never lost a spouse before, how could you possibly know what steps to take and what missteps to avoid? Where do you even begin? As we like to say around here, when you don't know where to start, you start with Wings for Widows. We are the only organization in the country that provides trusted, experienced financial advisors, certified financial planning professionals. That's a mouthful, so we use CFP for short. But we use our CFPs to treat the financial trauma affecting nearly all new widows. Financial trauma could be the loss of income, moving into more affordable housing or moving in with relatives, putting children into different schools, or even going back to work. And then there's the whole administrative side of loss, the mountain of forms and checklists, and that stuff can simply be too overwhelming. Some of you are nodding right now. Our expert coaches work with our widow clients for weeks and sometimes longer to help heal the financial trauma by providing pro bono financial planning. We address immediate concerns as well as provide financial clarity, as in, okay, this is my situation, here are my options, and now I can make some decisions. Financial clarity brings control, confidence, and peace of mind. Guiding widows to financial wellness is what makes Wings for Widows truly unique. And while it's not all we do, it's the core of what we do, because nobody else in the country is doing it. And we are honored and privileged to do it for you and your widowed brothers and sisters. So my simple message is, please tell others about us. Throw them the right lifeline at perhaps just the right time. Encourage them to visit our emergency room. You can count on us to take excellent care of them. Now it's my privilege to introduce Susan Burke, a former banker, now retired, and one of our favorite volunteers. More than that, she's walked the same path many of you with us tonight are walking. She's been there, she gets it, and she's going to introduce our special guest tonight. So without further delay, please welcome Sue Burke.
Good evening, everyone. As Chris said, I am Sue Burke. I'm a director for Wings for Widows, and I've been on this widow journey for 9 years now after my husband passed very unexpectedly at the doctor's office from an earache. A friend introduced me to another young widow. Hi, Renee. I think she's watching. And she convinced me to attend Camp Widow with her. What? A camp for widows? I was skeptical, but needed support and resources for this daunting new journey that I was on. That's where I first met Michele Neff Hernadez, founder of Soaring Spirits International. Michele lost her beloved husband, Philip, in a biking accident and was set on a journey to help herself and other widows navigate this new world. How do you proceed? When do you or should you take off your wedding ring? How do you find new purpose? How about your kids? Finances, When do you clean out his closets and how do you cook for one? Camp Widow answered so many questions that I didn't even know I needed answering. Michele brought hope into this crazy new world that I was in. Through all the hugs, tears, newfound information, and new friends, I did indeed find hope. I've attended 3 Camp Widows, and Michele and I have stayed in touch through Facebook and other ways. She truly is an angel on earth, as she has provided so much inspiration, knowledge, and a great shoulder to cry on. It is my great pleasure, and I am thrilled to have Michele kick off our fall series, Arise, a Widows Forum. Please welcome my dear friend, Michele Neff Hernadez.
Thank you so much, Chris and Sue and Leanne and all of the team at Wings for Widows. I am delighted and honored to be opening this new series with you all, and I thank you all for joining us tonight. So I want to just give you a sense of what we're going to talk a little bit about, and then we'll jump into some slides to help me share some pretty specific suggestions with you all. So I do want to give you a heads up while I'm doing this. At some point, my slides are going to say, grab a piece of paper and a pen. So any kind of writing implement will do, any kind of paper will do. I just want you to have that heads up so that if you want to run around and do that while I'm talking about something else, you can. So as Sue said, I'm Michele, and my passion is helping widowed people rediscover themselves after they have experienced the death of a spouse or partner. And one of the things we're going to talk about tonight is the reality that recreating the life that we had with our partner is not possible. And the frustration that so often comes for widowed people when they do their very best to get back to normal. Because as we all know, normal is no longer available in the way that it once was. I know that many widowed people have a fighting relationship with the words new normal. So we're not going to talk about that right now. But I do want to just acknowledge that part of the challenge of being widowed is that we are changed not only by the widowed experience, not only by outliving our spouse or partner, but we're also changed by loving them. And so this shift is not just about the hard parts of widowhood and the sadness that comes with having to say a physical earthly goodbye to our people, but it is also about the ways we've been changed by loving that person and the changes that living our lives with that person have created in the foundation of who we are. So I want you just to have, as we go into this, a sense that our work tonight is in first part to acknowledge the changes, but secondly, to open ourselves up to the possibility of getting to know our new self. And that new self is the person who was born through the trauma of the experience that you've lived. I often will tell people, that my husband died on August 31st, and a version of myself died that day too. The person who had never outlived a spouse is no longer a version of myself that is true for me, right? I have now experienced the death of a spouse or partner and all of the changes and difficulties and even successes that have come since that time. And so the version of me that is living today is not the exact same version that was here and enjoyed the life that Phil and I had together. So let's dive into what I mean by that a little bit. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to start here. So as Leanne mentioned, I do have a book coming out, and I shared with the Wings for Widows team. This is the first time I've talked about my book publicly, so that's exciting. Thank you all for being a part of that. Anyways, the title of my book is Different After You, and it is about rediscovering ourselves and healing after grief or trauma have influenced us. So, but our focus specifically is on the impact of widowhood on our sense of self. So just to give you a little bit about me, I was widowed in 2005. I was 35 years old. I had a blended family. So I had 3 little ones. My kids were 14, 13, and 11 when Phil died. And I had 3 stepkids. They were 21, 19, and 17. So we had a blended family of 6 at the time of his death. And I did not know anybody who shared that similar experience. That sense of wanting to find other people who could understand this life I'd been thrust into led me to seek them out in a variety of ways. But basically, we land on the porch of founding Soaring Spirits International in 2008. That is the organization that I still run. I'm still the CEO of Soaring Spirits International. We'll talk a little bit more about what we do. But one of the key things that we do is host the Camp Widow event, which Sue mentioned. The next thing I did was begin participating in research about resilience and widowhood. And let me just tell you, one of the things that was the most fascinating to me was the discovery that identifying and reconnecting with our sense of self was one of the key areas that would result in the building of resilience for a widowed person. That means that discovering who we are again after having experienced this loss is a process that we each have to go through. And that process itself is building resilience. The Soaring Spirits Resilience Center is located on the campus of Schreiner University in Kerrville, Texas. Our purpose is to study resilience and widowhood and provide practical tools that will help people build resilience. And a lot of what I've written in my book is based on what I learned through that research. I've been presenting about widowhood and teaching resilience building techniques for widowed people for 13 years, which I still kind of find hard to believe. The time's flown by. But I want you to know that people have shared their stories with me over and over again. So in part, what I'm going to share with you tonight is a result of what I've learned through research. And in part, it's through the individual stories of each and every person that I have had the honor of speaking to over the past 13 years. Soaring Spirits has had the great honor of serving over 4 million widowed people in that time. And so I've had an opportunity to talk to thousands of widowed people about their experience, and the consistencies of what I'm going to share tonight never cease to surprise me on the one hand, and on the other hand, the universality of this experience, even in its nuanced individuality, is really inspiring to watch people find their way through this process. We will talk a little bit about the book. It's going to be published in February of 2022, and I'll tell you more about that in a little bit. Okay, so here's your time. This is your moment. If you'll grab that piece of paper and pen, again, any paper will do, even, something tiny like a sticky note. There's not a ton to write, but give yourself a little bit of space if you have one, and any writing implement will do, even phones. If you're going to just take notes, that works too. All right, so I'd like to introduce you to my beloved, my late husband, Philip Hernandez. And the reason that we have the title Different After You, and this actually is what I would like you to write at the top of your paper. Different After You is your heading for the notes that you're going to take tonight. And that's an intentional opportunity to start thinking about, how are you different after the experience that you've lived? And so for me, step one begins with my husband, Philip. So I'd love to bring him into the conversation and just share his beautiful face with all of you. We were married for 5 short years. As I said, we had a blended family. We got married in June of 2000 and he died in August of 2005. This is a picture of our wedding day. We got married on a trail. He had never been married before, and so I surprised him with a wedding gown on a on a dirt trail in bare feet. So it was a beautiful day, and one that changed me, right? So I want to also just mention here that as we're talking about the changes and the differences that we see in ourselves, I want you to also consider some of the differences that being partnered with your unique person brought to your life. So just as an example, Phil was an outdoorsman in every sense of the word. And while I enjoyed the outdoors, as much as the next person, maybe when we first got married, his love of nature and his love of all things trail has really influenced who I am. And that those changes still exist. I still have that. So there's going to be some things that you shared with your person that are going to carry forward into whatever you build next. And the beautiful thing is that's a legacy left from the love that you shared and the life that you shared. All right, so we want to go on to the first step of our process. And this is an acknowledgement that we have been changed. I know that for some widowed people, they really struggle with the idea that they can't go back to the same self they were before. And they expend a lot of energy, emotional energy, physical energy, mental energy, trying to shape their life to be just like it was before. And what I want to clarify is that your life going forward, even if you can't imagine it now, and for so many widowed people, the imagination part of this is really the hard part, right? But your life that you're going to build will not be exactly the same, but it can be equally good. So just because it's different doesn't mean it's bad. And so it's important to keep that in your mind, because oftentimes when changes come to us through means that we did not choose and did not want, our first thought is to push that change away. I don't want to be changed. And because I don't want to be changed, I fight against the changes, even though the changes are a fact, right? So it begins with the fact that your spouse or partner is not coming home again, right? That's a reality we have to get used to. And we get used to it. Why? Because of repetition, because of the daily repeating. That doesn't mean we like it, but it becomes a reality with which we learn to live. And so when we start thinking about the differences in ourselves, it's a similar process in that the more we fight it, the more we continue to pound against it, it doesn't change the fact that we are different. It just makes the process harder to come to a place where we accept those differences. So step one really is just opening your mind to the idea that you have been changed. And as I said, not only by the experience of outliving your spouse or partner, but also by loving them, by living a life with them, by building whatever it is the two of you built together in whatever amount of time you had together. So that's going to be our step one. When we attempt to return to normal, we set ourselves up for disappointment. And I don't know about you, but disappointment is one of my very least favorite emotions. I am a person who really struggles with disappointment. If we set up something and it was supposed to look just like this beautiful palace, and instead it looks like a cardboard box, I am not going to be happy about the disappointment that follows. Disappointment is something that I personally struggle with. Not everybody does, but for me, it's a difficult emotion. But the thing about setting ourselves up for a disappointment is that when we attempt to make our lives look exactly like they used to, And we struggle to achieve that because the person that we were before no longer exists. That person did not struggle through the things that you have lived through. And those struggles cause changes in us that are going to be lifelong part of who we are. Again, different isn't bad. Different doesn't mean you aren't a good version of yourself. It just means you're a different version of yourself. And when we set ourselves up to try to go back to, I'll tell you a brief story. I'll never forget this woman. And actually, I thank her at the end of the book because I'll never forget this moment. It was at a Camp Widow. It was the beginning of camp. She came running up to me and she was crying already. And she said, Michele, I just need you to answer one question for me. This weekend, you have to answer one question for me. And I said, I will do my very best. What is your question? And she said, when am I going to be back to myself? My family keeps asking me when I'm going to be fun again. My family keeps asking me when I'm going to stop being so sad. My family keeps asking me if I'm ever going to be the person they recognize again. And she was crushed by the idea that she couldn't figure out how to get back there. And the reality is she's never going to be the exact version of herself again. Does that mean she won't be fun? No. Does that mean she won't be funny? No, but it won't be the exact same person. And instead of setting ourselves up for that disappointment over and over again, my hope is that together, let's just push to the right slide for this, is that our work is to get to know this version of ourselves, the one that has experienced the death of a spouse or partner, and be able to welcome that person as ourselves, and then share that self with the other people in our lives. And I have a preview of a question that Leanne's going to ask me later. And I was just thinking about the fact that we don't live this experience in isolation, right? We have family members, we have children, we have friends, we have coworkers. The people around us are also looking for us to return to the person they recognize. And so that pressure can be significant for you to just get back to normal. But what I want to present to you instead is that our work is to get to know who we are now and then share that version of ourselves with the people around us. Will the people around us 100% accept us for the person we become? There's no way to predict that. Some people will, some people won't. Sometimes that's the difficulty as we grow and evolve. But I can tell you this, trying to pretend like it's not happening is painful for you, more so than anybody else, because no one else can feel that sense of disappointment that comes when somehow you just haven't measured up. All right, so what am I talking about? What might be different? So what I'd like you to do now under your heading, so different after you, is your reminder, right? That there are some differences, but there's some key areas where people typically experience some differences after living through a traumatic experience. For us in this group, that traumatic experience is the death of our spouse or partner. So the first thing is priorities. So I want, I know that I could ask this question generally, but I'm just going to ask you to answer this question in your head. What is it that you have no time for anymore? Is it drama? Is it people who have an opinion that you didn't ask for? Is it waste of time when you could be spending that time doing something you care about? For most people, what happens after living through something traumatic is there is a shift in their priorities. I can give you a small example for myself. I have 8 nieces and nephews between the ages of 10 or 13 now. Oh my gosh, 13 years old and 8 years old. There's 10 of them, or 8 of them, with a couple of 10-year-olds in the middle. And prior to Phil's death, my life was really full of events and things to do. And I wasn't really focused on making a connection with my nieces and nephews. After his death, I realized I've only got a short time with these little ones, and being able to make time to spend with them has led to me creating a crazy event called Auntie Christmas, where I bring all of them together. We have a sleepover. We do crazy Christmas things. I fill them with lots of sugar and I send them back to my brothers and sisters, very happy. But what I get from that is a connection with my nieces and nephews I never would have thought to value. And that has been a direct result for me of the priority shift that I experienced after Phil's death. Now, this priority shift is going to be different for everyone. And because we don't have a lot of time tonight, we're not going to explore this more than just to say, on this list, after we close up tonight, I hope you'll spend a little time thinking about and asking yourself the question, have my priorities changed? What's different about what I value after the experience I've lived through? Another common area of difference is relationships. So our relationships go through sort of a transformation, don't they, after the death of our spouse or partner. Sometimes I'll just give you a quick example. My next door neighbor, when Phil died, I didn't know her. We knew each other to wave in the driveway, but she wasn't a person who was a regular part of my life. We had just literally that day started carpooling for school because we were next door neighbors and our kids went to the same school. They were just starting middle school. So we were going to begin a middle school carpool. And sure we would have eventually become friends, but at the time we were not friends. The day that Phil died, she walked into my house and said, I'm going to be driving carpool from now until eternity. And I don't want you to argue with me. I'm just taking the kids and I'm bringing them home. We can talk about it later. This is a person I did not know beyond waving in the driveway and arranging a carpool, which seemed really convenient since we were next door neighbors. She's since become one of my very dear friends. I had other friends, as maybe some of you did, who felt too close to my sadness and weren't able to stay with me through those early days. Some of them left for good, some of them came back. But what happened was those relationships shifted around how I was feeling, how they were feeling, what they needed from me, what I needed from them. The other thing that really brought forward for me, though, was what relationships matter to me, which ones do I want to spend time with, and which ones will I not make time for. And so relationships is another really big category where people often find a shift. Sometimes it doesn't mean that you certainly have heard the common thought that for many widowed people, they lose all their friends or friends disappear, or the people they thought were going to show up didn't show up. And then sometimes the people you never knew could show up do show up. So what I want to point out about relationships specifically is that it can include your family members, it can include your children, and it can include, anyone who used to be a tiny part of your life and is now big and they shift over to be a smaller part. And I want to give you the freedom to say, none of the decisions you make around relationships have to be forever. That this is an evolving area as well. And so if you're struggling, for example, with your kids are struggling to get to know this new you and decide if they like the new version that you are, or they're struggling in their own grief and the way that they're grieving is sort of butting up against the way you're grieving. I just want to give you a little bit of hope that this is a transformative experience that happens over years. And so it's very possible that those relationships may shift and come back again. So if you're struggling right now with a relationship, just know that there is a possibility that another shift is going to happen and that relationship may become easier and or might become a larger part of your life. So relationships on your list of things, as you've written it down, all you need are these just hot topic words, right? So priorities, now relationships. I want you, after you're reflecting tonight, to really just think about how have my relationships been impacted by my experience. The next thing is home and environment. I don't know, I think for many people, one of the things that happened during the pandemic was that we were forced into a smaller space than we were typically used to. And whether that's our own home or whether we were stranded somewhere, whatever the pandemic experience looked like for us, in particular, if you experience the death of your spouse or partner during the pandemic or as a result of the pandemic, sometimes that home atmosphere can become really intense. Either it can be lonely, it can remind you of your loved one in a painful way, it can sometimes just feel like it doesn't fit anymore. And that is a very broad way of saying that there's a chance that the living conditions you have right now are not a good fit for the person that you are becoming as you heal. So I say that because of the pandemic, many people began reevaluating their home space, whether it was because they were needing now to work from home and they had to create a home office, or because they decided that their outdoor space was just not working for them and they had to get outside. I want you to consider in the same way that your home environment, no matter what your situation, is a reflection of who you are today. Is it a reflection of you, is my question. Is it a reflection of you in a couple, or is it a reflection of who you're becoming as you heal? And there's no right answers here. This is just a question for you to ponder. How do I feel in my home environment? Is it a good fit for this person that I've become? Okay, on to interests, careers. This is a kind of three for all packed into one. Please do list these because it's different for everyone, but your interest could be related to your career, the things you're passionate about, and the dreams you have for the future. I'll get to dreams for the future in a minute, but let's begin with career. A lot of people discover after they've had a traumatic experience that the life they were living just doesn't fit for them. And for some, I can't count the number of widowed people who have decided that they just want a different type of career, either because they were inspired by something that happened through their grief experience to try out a new career that they end up loving. Sometimes it's out of necessity for a change in income. But just something to think about is how you're spending your time. So for those of you who may be retired, what are your passions? Are they the same passions you had? Do you have the same hobbies? Do you like the same things? It's worth also considering, what else might I like? Are there other things that used to be a part of my life many years ago that I kind of let go? Is there something that might be wanting to come back in as I begin to shape a future for myself? And that's where the dreams portion comes in. And I think that the struggle for me when I was first widowed is that none of the dreams that Phil and I had were options, right, anymore. And so I just felt like none of the options sounded good. I didn't want any dreams. And what I discovered was that as I started just being willing to allow myself to follow whatever small spark of interest I had in a conversation or in a connection with another person or in even a movie or a thought that came to me, I started to understand that building dreams is not about saying to yourself, okay, I know what my 15-year plan is. It can be as simple as saying, this is something that's piquing my interest right now, and I'm going to allow myself to dream about it. So I'd like you to just consider reframing the word dream. If you are struggling with thinking about dreaming for yourself for the next 15 years, bring that down to the next week. Allow yourself to find something that interests you and spend a week exploring it. YouTube, books, movies. Give yourself an opportunity to be like, well, am I a deep sea diver? I don't know. Maybe I am. And allow yourself the freedom to just dream it, instead of what is typically our pattern as humans, right? Especially if you happen to be a type A person like me, and you want to lay all the plans out in a row and know where you're going to be, rather than follow a specific pattern, allowing yourself to explore ideas and explore possibilities is a way of dreaming that can spark what could be next for you. So how are you supposed to do all of these things? The first thing, again, this is something for you to write down. So ask questions. And guess who you're asking questions of? Yourself. Allow yourself to ask questions. You don't need to know the answers, but you can ask as many questions as you want. Do I like Mexican food? My husband and I went to Mexican food every single date night for all of our 5 years together. Do I like Mexican food? Do I like Mexican food every day for 5 years? Do I? And my answer is yes, by the way, but it's a question, right? So the answer might be the same. It's not about change for change's sake. It's about testing the waters and allowing yourself to ask questions. But maybe as important as asking the questions is allowing yourself to wait for the answer. The waiting for the answer is a part of how you can discover what's next. Instead of just choosing an answer, instead of plotting a course, you can ask a question and let it sit, and then allow yourself the space to try things and wait for the answers to come. The next thing, just as a wrapping up of the concept of this, is allowing yourself a chance to grow into a different self. if you can find a way to release the idea that different is the same as bad. And I will tell you that one of the things that has happened in my life since Phil's death is I married an Australian man who was living in Australia at the time when we met. And everything about his life was different than mine, from the side of the car that you drive from, to the side of the road you drive on, to words that you use for common household things, to what you call your mother, to how you express your emotion, all different. And what we had to do at the beginning of our relationship was continue to say out loud, different is not bad. It's just different. And if we can allow ourselves that space, then instead of fighting the differences that you find as results of the experience you've had, you have the opportunity to just ask the questions and wait for the answers. And if the answers are the same as the answer you would have given prior to your experience of your person's death, great, then that means it's a good fit for this you. If your answer is different, allow yourself the chance to be different. I want to remind you that evolution is the goal. Change is the byproduct, right? So sometimes we go into these kind of experiences and we think, oh, this lady thinks I'm going to be completely different and I'm supposed to be completely changed by my experience. The truth is, I don't know how different you are or what kind of changes are going to be helpful for you as you continue to evolve into your next self. What I know is that growth requires evolution. Evolution is the goal you can set. Change is the byproduct. It may come, it may not. You won't necessarily have to say, this is the change that I'm expecting to come out with at the end. You can allow that space for evolution to be the primary goal. So I just want to remind you that change for change's sake is not the point of this. The point is to ask the questions and allow the space for the answers. Okay, this is a cover of the book. So what you will find in the book is an exploration of everything we just talked about. I gave you like the minutest piece of one chapter. Pre-order on Barnes & Noble and on Amazon. Please feel free to order one and they deliver to you on February 8th. I want to give you a quick overview of the programs of Soaring Spirits, which are available for any person who is widowed. We have a broad definition of the word widow. So any person who's experienced the death of the person they thought they were going to spend their life with is welcome in our programs. We build peer communities for widowed people from all walks of life. We have relevant practical resources available for free from our website. We have a host of those available through the Soaring Spirits website. In addition to that, we have a virtual format, which is called Widowed Village. Again, has a document center, a library, quite a lot of resources available for any person who's widowed and their support systems as well. We do have in-person and virtual programming. So no matter whatever your comfort level of attending in person or joining us virtually, we have both of those options available. As I said, we've served over 4 million widowed people since 2008, and it has been an absolute privilege to do so. So I thank you so much for your time tonight. I can't believe how quickly it went by. So let's stop sharing this. SoaringSpirits.org is there. You can't miss it. Soaring Spirits, Google Soaring Spirits, it'll take you there for sure. And I am, like I said, so grateful to have this time with all of you. So thank you so much.
Wow, Michele, I always learn so much when we have a conversation, and I so appreciate getting to know you better and such wise advice that you're giving us. And it is so true that we are transformed, and it's good to realize it's not a bad thing. I wanted to just give everyone a little heads up. Now, this is where our new format is taking a big departure from what we were doing in the past. We used to have 2 speakers. Now we're only going to have 1 speaker and allow plenty of time for question and answer. So while I'm working towards some questions that I wrote for Michele, I'd like you to use your chat button to write your questions, and I will field those questions to Michele in a couple minutes. So go ahead and take time to write your own questions, and we'll bring those up in a couple minutes. But I do have a couple questions that I already wrote. Here we go, Michele. I did prepare her. She's not getting these from left field. She knows I ask these questions. What are some signposts along the way that tell us that we are making progress towards finding and accepting our new self after loss? In other words, what are some things that we might look for in ourselves that reassure us that we are moving forward?
I love that question. And I hope that this will resonate with all of you. The answer that came directly to mind was being uncomfortable. When we are uncomfortable in a space, our body, our minds, our hearts are telling us something. And so as you start to explore, there's two ways to know if you're in need of a shift of direction or if you're discovering something. One is if you're uncomfortable, and two is if you see kind of that light of hope under the door. So if something sparks your interest, follow that, because it's a signpost that this, whatever that is, whether it's a new career interest, a passion, a friendship, a new way of viewing something, if it lights you up inside, then that's something to really explore. And if you find yourself doing something and you just can't get comfortable. So this oftentimes happens in relationships. If you're in a relationship and every time you talk to this person, you struggle, then it's time to ask yourself, what is it about this? What is my body? What is my mind? What is my heart trying to tell me? So the guideposts that we have come in so many different places. One is the light that says, hey, look over here. And the other is, this is uncomfortable and it never used to be. Why is that? And so again, remembering that the point of the question is not to drill down and get to an answer right away. It's to allow the question to sit. And especially if it's an uncomfortable one. So let's say that your next door neighbor and you have been great friends forever. And since you've been widowed, there's something that just makes you uncomfortable, but you can't kind of get to what it is. You don't have to cut off your next door neighbor necessarily, but you've got to ask yourself the question, what is it about this relationship that's bringing up something for me that I need to address? And this new version of me may not be as comfortable with something that was okay for me in my prior version.
Thank you. I'm experiencing something. I'm 4.5 years now from the loss of my husband, and we were married for over 40 years. And I'm finding that it's my kids, my adult children, we're just having a hard time communicating with one another because I think they delayed grieving and they have not really caught up to where I think I might be right now in terms of grieving and letting go. And it's just interesting to see how our communication is kind of, if you can see my screen, we're just like not quite matching up. And it's interesting to see that transformation is happening in me, and I think in them, but it means we're not matching up anymore like we used to.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Leanne, because it looks like someone in the chat said the same. And here's the interesting thing, and I want to remind you all, no matter how long you've been widowed, right? The widowed experience is a transformative experience, and it will continue to evolve you in all kinds of ways for I don't know how long. I expect for the rest of my life. So the thing about that is your kids have to get to know this new you, right? And that's uncomfortable for them, sometimes uncomfortable for you. And it requires us to stand in our own power. But let me just remind you all that the first thing you have to do is be able to like your new self. Because if you don't like the person you're becoming, then your ability to advocate for her is going to be negatively impacted. And so your new self is going to need you to advocate for her, because I promise you somebody's going to be uncomfortable with the choice you make, or an evolution that's going to be a part of that feels absolutely necessary to you, but is a struggle for other people around you. And what I would encourage you to say, so the question that I saw says, how do you explain this transformation to others, especially siblings or your spouse? And I think that you can use those words. I have been changed by what's happened to me, and I'm learning who I am. And I'm inviting you to get to know me while I'm doing this. And some people won't be able to, that's just true, but that doesn't mean forever, right? So you can't throw the kids out with the bathwater. So, when it's a family member, when it's people who are close to you, being able to continually say, I'm learning what works for me now, is really a great way to advocate for yourself. But before you can do that, you have to, 1, know that you have been changed. 2, accept that different is not bad. And 3, allow yourself the space to figure it out, because the truth is, it takes however long it takes, and will continue to be evolving as we move forward, especially when you consider that those early years of widowhood are just learning how to survive. Like there's not a lot that you're doing in that beginning portion besides figuring out how to do the next day and the next day and the next day. When you get to a more settled place in your widowhood, we like to call that the middle widow years at Soaring Spirits. That's 3 to 5 years, where you start to be really kind of like, okay, who am I really in this? And those years can be challenging for everybody around you, but it's also an opportunity. So if you can remember that it's an opportunity, not just for you, but for them too, to get to know who you are now, for your kids to know you in a different way, to understand what makes you tick now, the things that are important to you now. And yeah, it is going to butt heads with their grief, because here's the thing I always tell widowed people, in particular about children, is that their trajectory, if they were to grieve their father for the rest of their life in the same exact way, it would not change their life milestones. Right? Of course, he would be missed, but it's not going to change the way they live their life. They're still going home to the same place. They're going to have kids. They're going to do whatever is next, which would naturally happen for them. If you allow your life to be derailed by someone else's need for you to stay the same, your trajectory will be changed. And so we end up needing to be advocates for ourselves. That takes time. It takes practice. It takes dedication. But more than any other thing, it takes being able to say, I'm kind of awesome. This person who lived through all that is a rock star, and people around me are going to have to get used to that, and they're going to have to get to know who I am now.
Well, you kind of jumped right into my next question, which was when we talked before this, we talked about the kind of the stages, early widowhood, middle widowhood, and later widowhood, and how sometimes you're making progress and then you kind of get derailed. So I wanted to say, in your experience in working with so many people, have you seen some patterns in terms of what kinds of things can derail us in, say, the later part of our widowhood, knowing that this whole thing is transformative and it's going to take the rest of our lives, but there are certain things to be aware of that come up at certain points that seem to derail people?
I'm so glad that you came up with that question. And I just want to give you like a snapshot of how at Soaring Spirits we define the stages of being widowed. So don't be worried, they're not the stages of grief. But newly widowed people we consider to be 12 months and less. Recently widowed is 1 to 3 years. Newly widowed is you're just learning this. You're doing the first of everything, right? 1 to 3 years, you're starting to get your feet under you, but you're realizing like, okay, this is like forever. So I'm going to have to start figuring out how I do this. Middle widowed is 3 to 5 years. Those are those years of trying to start to figure out who are you in this experience and what kind of life do you want to have. And then seasoned widowed, we call that 5+ years. So when you heard Leanne say that we will be influenced by this for the rest of our lives, I hope that any of you who are more newly widowed can rest assured that it will not be the same as it is right now. And that transformation really is an opportunity. I know it is not one we asked for. It may not be one you want, but I want you to know that as you go through your widowhood, I've been widowed 16 years, and my widowhood still influences me in my perspective. I shared that with you already, in the ways I deal with my relationships. So the kind of things that I'm seeing as results of my widowed experience are the kind of things that build a meaningful life for this version of me. And so those kind of things that can derail you typically include being over influenced by other people as a way of wanting to please them, or an attempt to get back to normal, whatever the thing is that's normal, right? So, I want to give you a silly example, which is if you were a person who used to love to watch horror movies, and then you experience some kind of break-in or some kind of a horrible attack, and suddenly you can't watch horror movies anymore. Of course, people would immediately say, oh no, of course you don't want to watch those anymore. How long might that last? It might last your whole life, but it might not. And so being able to say to yourself, what do I need right now? Address that for how it is in the moment, and then allow the evolution to continue to happen. Be able to continue to ask questions. Do I like to watch that kind of movie? Do I like to eat that kind of food? Do I want to, a common one for me when I first was widowed, people ask me all the time, are you going to ride your bike again? Phil and I used to ride bikes together. The truth was, I never liked riding the bike. I did it because it was a form of exercise. He loved it and I wanted to do it with him. So no, I don't ride a bike anymore. And that took a long time for me to be able to say that confidently, because I wanted to please other people. They felt like they needed me to get back on my bike so that I could prove to them that I was not broken. And I made the mistake of thinking that being broken was a bad thing, and forgetting that in order to heal, we have to be broken first. So I just want to remind you that when we try to please other people to our own detriment, that is a way that we can be derailed for a long time. So as an example, if your adult children are struggling with some choices you're making, now I'm not suggesting that you don't take into account legitimate feedback. Again, that's a whole other portion of what we could talk about. But what I want to say about it is just make sure that when you feel solid in your decision and your new self is telling you you need something, being able to stand in that decision and allow other people to be uncomfortable is the way to get back on track. Because sometimes our desire to please people is such, or even our desire to feel like we can be loved, right? We don't want the people, we've already lost so much. We don't want the people around us. We don't want to lose more relationships. We don't want to have difficulties with our kids. We want to support them in their grief. I just want to remind you, you can have both and. It doesn't have to be either or. And being able, but the first step is not being sucked into other people's insistence that you be a certain way because that's how you used to be. Ashley asks if finding a new love helped me move through the grief and process of trauma. Ashley, that's a great question. And it's a complicated answer because the answer is yes and no. I felt like I had to be in a place where I knew my new self well enough to make a good choice, right? And I did think initially that I was going to have to be done grieving before I could love someone else. Then I realized, well, I'm probably going to be grieving Phil for as long as he's dead. And since that seems to be an ongoing thing, that means forever. And so that means that love and grief do sit side by side. So yes, loving my new husband has both healed my heart and also challenged me to embrace life again, because he's mortal and one of us is certainly going to die first. And so I had to come eye to eye with the reality that loving him meant risking being widowed again. And so to answer your question, it was both a healing and also a challenge, and still is. We've been married for 11 years, twice as long as I was married to Phil. And he's a wonderful man. He has altered my life. And I'll tell you, right? So when we talk about different after you, I'm different after him. I'm different after loving him already. And so, should the day come where he dies first, I will have been transformed again from loving Phil, losing Phil, loving Michael's transforming me now. And so that transformation continues. So I always just put out the idea for you to consider that while a new relationship and love is definitely a healing experience, you want to make sure you're ready to be in a position to allow that love to come in, to be able to make a choice that's right for your new self, because it won't be exactly the same as the person who is right for your other self. Phil would never in 100 million years come to the mini conferences and parties and meetings and all the things Michael does, because that just wasn't him. And I didn't need that this time. I needed a different kind of person to be the right partner for the life I live now.
My last prepared question, and then it's certainly open for others to put questions in the chat, is do you have any particular books, workbooks, or activities that you recommend on the practical side, tools to help us learn and discover who we are?
So the interesting thing about this is that the answer is unique to every person. And so what I ask people to do is really be open to all possibilities of things that used to matter to you now. Literally start your day by asking yourself a question about a regular habit that you have, and continue to be open to learning more about that. So use everything you can find: blogs, books, YouTube videos, experiences. So for me, the discovery process is less about a study of something specific for everyone and more about an individual following of the things that matter to you. If painting matters to you, if gardening matters to you, if gardening used to matter to you, but then you didn't have a plot anymore, is there a way that that could be a part of your life again? So continuing to look for that. I also do want to mention on the Soaring Spirits website, we do have a book library now. It is a massive collection of books on every topic you can imagine, and really sort of highlights that development of exploration around how we're changed through the grief process. I also would recommend that you take a look at our widowed resilience scale, which will kind of give you some suggestions of areas for building resilience, which might help sort of spark some ideas of what might work for you. You can find all of that on the Soaring Spirits website right from the homepage. And again, like a plethora of options. I struggled with that question a little, only because there's so many and because it's a different experience for everyone. I will say that what I gave you tonight was just a snapshot. So an option for being able to finish my book, is that the point of it is learning about your new self. So that is another way, but you'll have to wait till February.
Well, I have to say, now we have offered a class called Finding Purpose After Loss. And every time it gets filled up. It's a 7-week class.
Great.
And the facilitator in that does use some of the personality tests.
Good.
And encourages people to take that test like every 6 months or so, because as you're going through this process of changing, your priorities are changing, even some aspects of your personality are changing. Another thing in exercise that is done in that class is kind of a priority of your values.
Nice.
And learning, setting that up and saying, okay, now, these are the things I used to care about. I'm surprised, but this is really, my hot button thing right now. And it is interesting to see how we transform. And it's a very helpful class. Again, it's full right now, but we offer it 3 times a year. So
awesome. Well, and everything that you guys do through the Arise series is designed to help people learn more about who they are and what resources are available to them. So, I'm impressed with the number of people who are here already. Just the fact that you're here means that you're looking into who am I and beginning to explore that answer.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and that's the whole purpose of doing this. It's to really give people some encouragement tools. Also, a big piece of this is to know that you're not alone, that your journey is something that is shared with many, many people. And I think when I was a brand new widow, I felt like no one else is going through this. I think I'm going crazy. And it was so helpful to meet other people that felt the same way. Even though we were all lost together, we were at least together.
Yes, that's right.
So yeah, so that's a big part of what makes us tick here at Wings for Widows as well. Well, I don't have any other questions that have been queued up here for me. And
I think we came right to the end of our time.
yes, we have.
Filled it
And
right up.
I want to also just remind people that we are going to be doing this wonderful thing again in 2 weeks. It's September 22nd. And that is going to be, our presenter will be Laura Gilbert. She's the author of the book, The Stories We Leave Behind. And it is one of my favorite books. I can't achieve what she has achieved, but she has kind of made an art out of curating our stuff and making our stuff tell a story, so that when we leave this earth, we aren't leaving just a huge pile of miscellaneous junk for people to go through, but we've actually thoughtfully put together the things that we want to leave behind for our family. And this especially applies when you're dealing with your husband's things. So I've asked her specifically to focus on that in our talk. So be sure and register for that. Now I need to thank Michele. Just big hugs through the internet to you. Thank you so much for all the wonderful advice and great wisdom that you've shared. And we're really excited for your book to come out. Thank you, Sue, for introducing Michele and making that a more personal introduction. And I don't know if Chris is still on the call, but we want to really thank Chris for just his vision and all the hard work that he does to make Wings for Widows just a very successful and wonderful organization. Please be a part of Wings for Widows. If you're not following us on Facebook or you're not familiar with us, it's easy, wingsforwidows.org, and you can explore our website. Like Soaring Spirits, we have lots of good resources there. And the unique thing about us is that we do offer coaching to widows and widowers to help them get their feet on the ground in terms of finances, budget, credit, all that icky stuff. So it's a wonderful organization, and I hope you'll take advantage of some of our services. So with that said, many people are saying thank you and can't wait for your book, Michele. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And I hope
and Leanne, Chris, Sue, Dana over there in the background, everybody from Wings for Widows. Wonderful to be here tonight. Thank you so much.
Yes, we're really glad you could be with us. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you again on the 22nd. Good night.
Good night.